happiness is, on the positive side, extremely important. The Torah tells us that you should serve God with joy and with happiness all the time. That means it's a very important ingredient. It gives us an opening of the mind and an opening of the heart. When a person does not have joy, does not have happiness, so then he's constricted in his mind. That means he is limited in his thinking capacity. He's constricted in his heart, in his emotions. That means he is limited in his experience of his emotions. And then that means that he's not working on a full throttle. If your nose, if you have a sinus problem and you can't, your nose is not working well, so then you are losing out on a lot of experiences around you. The smell of the food, which adds to the taste of the food, the smell of your surroundings, which could be pleasant and which could be sometimes dangerous, right? So you're missing out on a lot of very important elements of life. By the way, I'm giving you an example related to smell very intentionally, because smell of the five senses is most related to the soul. And I want to say another introduction before I go further. I'm going to be touching upon a lot of subjects tonight, because it's just an introduction to the many different webinars and sessions that I intend to give to you in the future. And so I just wanted you to get a taste of the many different areas and possibilities that are there for you to tap into to experience more joy, more happiness, and a more abounded way of living. So we're going to touch upon a lot of different subjects tonight. So when I'm giving you an example that is related to sinuses and smell, it's very intentional, because smell is very much connected. Even in science, they haven't yet figured out, the nose can pick up, I think it's 1 million or an incredible amount of different types of scents. I mean, it's almost like an infinite capability of the body to be able to distinguish between so many different types of scents. We don't even know how it actually works. How exactly does the scent connect itself in the nose, and then we are able to make those distinguishing identities between one scent and the other, and the way it's interpreted by the mind, and then it affects very much the soul and our consciousness, right? When somebody faints, we wake them up with very deep smelling salts. So when a person's smell is constricted, he is left out of a lot of very important experiences in life. Those that are positive, those that can protect him from things that are negative. It's even more so when a person's mind and a person's heart is constricted and limited. They are losing out on some very important experiences that can help enhance life and can help protect from areas that are dangerous in life. That's when a person's mind and when a person's heart is limited. You won't be able to have the right intuitions. You won't be able to have the right insights into judgment, into things of that sort. And one of the key ingredients for the broadest experience of thinking and of experiencing life is joy and happiness. And unfortunately, there's a large percentage, depending on how you define a lack of joy and happiness, down to depression and crazy other thoughts that make a person's life hopeless. And it's never hopeless. Life is never hopeless. There's always hope. And that's what we're going to talk about, because there's always God, and there's always the potential that is in a person to overcome and to continue marching along the path of life. So a very important ingredient is joy and happiness, and that's what the subject is tonight. And I've already touched upon many different very important thoughts related to joy and happiness, right? It says when the prophet wanted to prophesy, he got his helper to play on the musical instrument, and it lightened them up and it made them joyous and happy. That's the way it's described in the book of the prophets. And then the Spirit of God rested upon the prophet. So, number one, we see the importance of music. And of course, like everything else we talk about, everything in this world has, like in science itself, matter and antimatter, positive and negative. there are these two extreme opposing forces in every area of life, love and hatred, right? So there's always happiness and unhappiness. And King Solomon, he points them out in his 14 descriptions of a time to live and a time to die, a time to be happy and a time not to be happy, right? 14 and corresponding to another 14, which is 28 in total. So it's very, very powerful, and it's very, very important that a person should listen to the right kind of music, because the right type of music is the right kind of vibrations. That's what music is, right? It's vibration through the air that hits a person's eardrums, and then it goes through these little bones in the ear canal, and then it vibrates its way into the person's brain, and it does a different job than when you're just talking to a person. Somehow it's on a higher and on a deeper vibration music. And so you want to listen to the right kind of music, and that type of music puts a person in the right frame of mind and the right kind of emotions, and then he's open to the presence of God. Just like the Torah says, strength and joy is in the presence of God. In the presence of God, you have to be joyous, and then you will be strong, and it all goes together. Joy, God, strength, all of that goes together. And so that's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about how can we tap in to something which is very important, and a very important ingredient to be able to experience more of life, and that's joy. Music is one such way to bring out and to sort of say, wake up the joy that is within the person. Because the truth is, joy is our natural identity. Look at children; they're always happy and joyous, unless they all of a sudden feel there's a kind of a need. So then it interrupts the joy for a moment. But once they get the need addressed, they're fed. All of a sudden, they're joyous and they're happy. And all of a sudden, we grow up, and unfortunately, for many of us, it becomes hidden and covered. And so, really, joy and happiness is our real identity, because we all have a portion of God within ourselves, and God is joyous, God is happy, God is broad, and God is not constricted and limited. He's actually infinite. And infinity and a wide and broad possibility only can come when a person is joyous and when a person is happy. So it's so important to try to focus and to try to make sure that we are in a joyous and in a happy mood. So the first thing, that I want to share with you tonight is just simple pieces of advice, but there's so many pieces of advice, and there's so many different paths and ways and tools in order to bring out the joy, to bring in the joy, to experience the joy, the strength, and the happiness, because a human being is made of almost an infinite amount of facets and dimensions, right? Depending how old, how young, depending whether it's a male or a female, depending on so many different other. Every single person is different than the other. No two people are the same. So they need to be addressed in different kinds of ways. And there is a essential way that everybody is the same. And that's why we go to the doctor, because there's certain pathologies, there are certain human nature which is the same for most people before it turns into the specific identity of each individual. So let me share with you just some of the ideas that are helpful to everybody in order that they be able to tap in and be able to experience more of that joy, more of that happiness, more of that tranquility in life. And the first thing is built in already to our Jewish tradition. That is the first thing we do when we open up our eyes. The sages already designed our day and our life in such a way that it should bring about all the possibilities of being able to serve God. That's what the sages are about. That's what the prophets are about. These are messengers that are meant to share with us the messages of the Torah, of God's wisdom, in order to make us more in line with God's mission here in this world. So what did the sages instruct and design the day? The first thing we do is we say, Modeh ani lefanecha. which is we are acknowledging the fact that we woke up. We're not just the first thing we do and the alarm clock rings, we're swearing that we had to wake up, or we're saying, no, not another day, or whatever else can go on as well. No, the first thing, as a matter of fact, Rabbi Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he once told his wife, the Rebbitzin, that his most favorite prayer of the day is the Moda Ani. Imagine how much strength and depth there must be then in that prayer, that the holiest person that I know said this is his most favorite prayer. If prayer is a matter of connecting with God, that's what really prayer should be. It's much more than just asking God for our own personal needs, but prayer is more a matter of connecting with God. And Rabbi Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, said that the Modeh Ani is his most favorite way of connecting with God. This teaches us a huge, big lesson. The beginning of prayer every single day is Hodu Lashem Kiru Bishmo, which means acknowledge God, those that call his name. In other words, we're acknowledging, we're offering gratitude. And this is such an important quality that we need to develop. Let me say something else while I'm talking to you. And that is, there is no way to put anything in your world and in your life by just paying money or putting in a battery or getting a chip into your nose and into your brain. That doesn't work that way. The way to improve your life is conscientious effort, slow and conscientious effort to the place you want to reach. So, a lot of us, it comes easier. A lot of us, it comes a little harder. A lot of us haven't behaved in this way, so our habits are not in line with this type of attitude. But this is a very, very important behavior that we should either strengthen or that we should consider taking on upon ourselves, and that is to be more grateful for the miracles that God give us. Listen, if you're on tonight living in the United States and listen to me on Zoom, you are better off than the majority of the people in the world. I watch the news, you know what's going on, the fights, the wars, the killing, the lack of food, what's going on all over the world. You're, thank God, in a home with a roof over your head. You're listening to me through a computer. You have ears and eyes to be able to see and to be able to hear. You are so far ahead of so many other people who don't have all that. So it's important to recognize the areas in our life that deserve gratitude. And this is so important because not only when a person is grateful, he can't be angry when a person is grateful. When a person is truly grateful, he's not angry. He's not angry about the world or about anything else. And when he puts his mind into being grateful, he is not going to be angry. He's not going to be fearful of anything because right now he's focused on the miracles and on the goodness that he has in his life. So that's number one. I'm going to move along at a fast pace, I think, because I have a lot to say. And I'm going to give you much more than you ever imagined and that you get on a regular. I listen to other talks. Sometimes you can go through an entire hour and you can distill everything the guy said in maybe 10 minutes. Not me and not in tonight's webinar. So we're going to go through a lot of stuff. And like I said, each one of these things can be expanded and expounded upon for a class or two class or three classes in itself. So that's number one. Let's just leave it with that. And that's why I told you take out a piece of paper and a pen or whatever you do to write down notes. I can't understate how important it is to be grateful, to recognize the good things in life, even when you go through something which is harsh and what appears to be no good, but look for the silver lining around it. It's going to help so much going through life when you can only see or when you can focus more on the positive side. The next thing, when a person wakes up and he says Moda Ani, or he begins with giving grace and gratitude to God, is you got to live in the moment. Success is only in the moment in whatever a person does. That's already an old saying from the Hasidic masters. That is where a person sees success. He makes the best out of every moment when he lives in the moment. You get out of bed, and I don't know if you're going to the bathroom, which is a mitzvah to do, that a person relieves themselves of everything before they go out and do their morning prayers and everything else. All right? Stay focused on that. A lot of people, they wake up and the first thing they do, they're starting to think and they're starting to listen and they're starting to whatever else. No, just stay focused on the moment. Clean your teeth and think about that you have toothpaste and you have teeth to go and brush. And you gotta stay more focused on the moment than let the fears and the anxiety and the thoughts steal you from the moment that you're in. And this is a lesson throughout the day. But right from the beginning of the day, these are the things that we have to train ourselves to do. You're going to the bathroom, stay focused on the fact that you're right now. Thank God. You start out with gratitude. Then you can go to the bathroom. I had an operation some time ago, and when you can't go to the bathroom, that's a terrible thing. So recognize that it's a miracle that you could go to the bathroom and be grateful that it's working today, right? And appreciate this moment that you can go to the toilet. As crazy as that, funny as that sounds, but it's true. If you will relish and appreciate that moment, it's going to put a smile on your face. It's going to give you something else to be thankful and hopeful about. The next thing is you get out of bed. Don't feed laziness. Don't feed laziness by pushing the snooze button. Okay, maybe once in a blue moon you do push the snooze button, you went to bed late or whatever, but on a regular basis, you got to get into the habit of getting out of bed, jumping out of bed and moving on, not getting onto the habit of being lazy. And we're going to get into that. I don't think tonight we're going to have a chance to do that, but a person has to have a dream. A person has to have a purpose. A person has to have a mission. And when you have a purpose and when you have a mission, you have something big in your life that you dream about, but even if you're not working and you're retired, you have to create a purpose and a mission in life. For some people, it's just that I can pray today and I can meditate and I can go out and see my spouse and my children, my grandchildren, or I can listen to the chirping of the birds and express gratitude to God for a beautiful universe that He created. Get out of bed and do that. Don't stay in bed and feed laziness. It's also it's something that is movement to the body. Movement to the body is very good. When you sit on your couch and you sit back and you feed that laziness, a lot of other bad things go along with that. Laziness is not a good is not a good habit to get into. There's one thing about resting for a purpose, but there's another thing to keep on saying, I can't get out of bed. It's so warm here under the covers. No, you slept. That's it. The day is now starting. Get out. Be grateful, as we said, right? Do what you're supposed to and move on. Another very important thing is when a person does finally get out of bed and he gets dressed, you got to be focused on, we say the morning blessings and we're expressing all this thankfulness and gratefulness to God for waking up and for being able to put on our clothes and for being able to get up and stand on our 2 feet and all the blessings that we say. And then the last paragraph in the morning blessings talk about the great things that we can get involved in. And we go on with that paragraph and we talk about and we talk about all these things that are about serving, of being of service. And this is maybe one of the biggest ideas that will help a person eliminate depression or unhappiness or laziness in life, and that is being focused on what can I do to make the world a better place? How can my existence help make somebody else or the world a better place? When a person is thinking on a outside kind of focus rather than always me, the source of depression is me. Person becomes what's called in quantum physics a black hole. He starts eating himself up with the gravity of his own identity. And then he becomes like a black hole that even anything that's around him starts getting sucked in to this place which is black, not white. It's not illuminated. It's not light, which is good for the person and good for anything around them. And so a very, very important idea is that a person should right away in the morning start thinking to themselves, what am I going to be? What am I going to do to make a difference in this world? So those are just, simple ideas that the Torah tells us, and that is built in already into the beginning of our day to make us happy and make us joyous and make us in this kind of frame of mind and in this emotional place that will lift us up instead of pulling us down and making us heavy. So that was just an introduction to tonight's talk and session on a very simple level. To some of you that are on tonight's webinar, you may know, and I said at the beginning of today's session, that the third book I'm working on is quantum physics. It's a difficult subject. A lot of people are not familiar with it. But in a nutshell, one of the things about quantum physics and quantum mechanics is that it deals on a very, very small subatomic level with energy that is unpredictable. It's indeterminate. Everything depends on the observer. Everything depends on what you focus on, when you focus, and how you measure things. And so quantum physics is the area of science that deals with the deepest, the most fundamental levels of everything in this universe. So, everything in this universe, you may be familiar with Einstein's equation of E equals mc squared. And the bottom line of that equation is that everything in this world comes down to energy. Quantum physics deals with this energy, how it's excited, the energy out of quantum fields, and then they turn into particles. From the wave kind of function, it turns into a particle, and then it turns into this entire universe. How's that for a one sentence defining what quantum physics is? But that's really the underlying deep down. Because why am I mentioning this right now? In life, everybody wants to feel that they have control, that there's predictability. And when there isn't predictability, we get into an accident. Somebody becomes sick, right? All of a sudden, it didn't turn out the way we want to. And the truth is, everybody experiences this. There is no one person in the world that can say that everything, as smart as they are, as scientific as they may be, that they can finally come to the point where everything is predictable in their life. That's not true, right? What happened when Israel went and sent up that last rocket up to wherever it went, Mars or the moon or wherever it was? The last moment, it was unpredictable. I think Elon Musk sent up also something else with all their science and with all everything else. And every time you go to the hospital, God forbid, for whatever it may be, it's no doctor in the world can tell you 100% or even close to 100% that they can be sure the outcome is going to be. Because the truth of the matter is that underlying everything, there is an unpredictability, there is an indeterminate kind of identity to everything. And so to truly be comfortable, to truly be happy in life, you have to realize that life is unpredictable. You wake up in the morning, you go out into your car, who knows what the day is going to be? But this is really the focus of what I'm best at, and that is to train people to become comfortable with surprises and know that surprises are really planned. They're not, all of a sudden by mistake or random. There is no randomness in this world. There is no mistake in this world, because everything in this world is governed and influenced by a very, very intelligent God. And this is not something that he can touch upon in tonight's talk, in tonight's webinar, because this is something which takes many, many different sessions to be able to understand. All the great philosophers says that the absolute knowledge is to not know. But in order to really not know, it takes building upon a lot of knowledge to be able to know that you don't know. If you're ignorant, then you don't know that you don't know. You're just ignorant. And so to really understand who God is and why he deserves all the credit for everything there is here in this world, you have to really study God. You have to study, as the Rambam Maimonides says, understand how complicated this world is and how impossible it is that it came together through a random chance. You know, I was watching a video the other day. There are 52 cards in a deck of cards. And so the mathematical kind of chances there are when you mix together all those cards and with each other, that the combination of cards should be the same one time and another time. The speaker was giving an example. It would be like if you took an atom. An atom is so small, or even let's say a diamond, a grain of sand, and you took a grain of sand and you marked that grain of sand and you put it down on a beach, and you told this person, another guy that doesn't know where you put it down, but it could be on the beach of any place in the world. Go find this grain of sand that was marked. You now go and find it. It would be impossible. Now, there may be a number associated with what the chances are that a person could find that grain of sand when he starts looking in all the beaches of the world for that one grain of sand, but it is so infinitely improbable that it's basically impossible that a person should be able to find a grain of sand that was put down on a beach and you don't know where we put it. Now you tell somebody else it's somewhere in the world, go find it. It's impossible. And so this guy was saying that when you take 52 cards and you flick them together in order to make a deck of cards, that is what the chances, that's how many possibilities there are for the cards to go and mix with each other when you go and you mix them together. The world has so many more different aspects than just 52, and for the universe to be the way it is, exactly the way it operates on a regular basis, it's impossible mathematically, basically. Even if you could put a number associated to it, that it all happened by chance. There is no randomness in this world. The fact that it all comes together exactly the way it does, and at every single time your cells find that one grain of sand when it's supposed to, and there's so many different things. There's trillions of cells in your body, and each time they're all finding their right place and working the way it's supposed to. It's impossible if it wasn't for somebody that's putting it exactly where it's supposed to be at every single second. And when you understand all these things, you understand that there's nothing that really happens for no reason. And then you start to become comfortable with the uncertainty and the unpredictability of things in this world, because you know it's not happening in a vacuum. And it takes time to be able to see these things. It takes patience to be able to appreciate these things. I was watching a YouTube podcast the other day, and the YouTube podcast was interviewing these big billionaires that started out, in a very simple, poor type of upbringing. One of the guys that I happened to stumble upon with this Paul Orfella from Kinko's. He sold his business, I think it was for $8 billion. And I'm watching the interviewer. You see, here is the problem, and what makes what you're going to hear in my webinars very different, or in my sessions or in my teaching sessions, different than many other people who talk about happiness and joy. All the other guys are giving you a temporary feel of control, of power. You do this, and you're going to be successful. You do that, and you're going to be, you're going to find your answer. They're giving you a path that guarantees what the outcome is going to be. But that's impossible. The underlying nature of our existence is unpredictability. The majority of people who are listening to this will forget, won't have the strength, don't have the nature, and whatever else. So All of that is just temporary good feelings, but the truth is far, far from what these guys are selling you. They're selling you something that at the moment makes you feel in control, which everybody wants to feel in control. They don't want to feel like their life is not in control. But the fact is that the majority of everything that happens in life is not in our control. The weather is not in our control. Whether you were born a man or a woman is not in control. Which country you were born in is not in your control. The economy is not in your control. If you think about it, the most important things in your life are not in your control. And so we have to learn a way to be able to become comfortable and accepting of what's not in our control. And the only way that can happen is if we realize that there is a God behind everything. And this God is infinitely smart and infinitely kind, because it's not a matter of just the harder I work, the luckier I get, the luckier I get. And that's the key word over here. So this interview that I was listening to with Paul Orfella from Kinko's, so he's being interviewed by this podcast guy that is trying to convey the message. It's all about learning from the billionaires, and then you will be a billionaire too. That is so far from the truth. Remember when the Torah tells us whether a person is going to be rich or poor is already decided for the person before he was even born, and you can't change that. How much money a person is going to make that year was already decided on Yom Kippur, and you can't change that. There are some little, things you could do to that and work on, but that's for another time. But for the most part, those things are already determined. So in that interview with Paul Orfella, this guy from Kinko says, and I'm going to quote to you, he says, luck has more to do with life than we think. The guy that was interviewing him didn't want to hear that, so he tried to change the subject. But this guy, Paul Orfella, kept on repeating. And then he went through his life, how he started out poor and how he tried so many different things, and how all of a sudden he fell into this idea, and then one thing to the other, and he is attributing luck to it. So in other words, he is saying the outcome of life, he's calling it luck. I'm calling it the force that causes things to happen, which of course is God, right? So in other words, I'm trying to convey to you right now that there are unpredictable things in this world. That's actually in science, they're recognizing that's the cornerstone. That's the fundamental foundation to cells, to atoms. We don't know when they're going to express themselves. We don't know how they're going to interact with each other. Okay, at a certain point, there becomes a certain statistical, what we call norm. But still, nobody ever can guarantee anybody else who's going to fall into that statistical norm and who's going to fall into the exceptions to the median, to the general rule for that group of cells or whatever it is. I'll tell you a story, an interesting story that happened with us right over here. Happened with me myself. So the other day, one of the fire chiefs came over here to our synagogue here in Florida, South Florida, and he says he come. I'll make it short because I see time is moving. But like I said, I'm going to give you a lot of good stuff to think about. That's what I do. I give you a lot of things from many different areas and ways that can fill your life and can fill your mind with what is necessary to give you strength, what is necessary to give you proper perspective, healthy perspective, positive perspective, accepting perspective, grateful perspective. So this guy walks in over here to the synagogue, and he's so excited, and he starts telling us a story, and that he met somebody 8 years ago, and that he helped him retrieve a bag that he felt left on his car. Anyways, to make a long story short, my son-in-law was driving out of our synagogue, and he forgot his bag of tefillin on top of his car. And Chabad people put out 2 of these tefillin, these things that we wrap around our hand and on our head. They're very expensive, a couple of $1,000s. And he left it on the top of his car. You get sometimes distracted. You go into the car and you drive off. It happens with sometimes women who leave their purse. Happens sometimes with people who put their coffee, and you get distracted. You go into the car and you drive off. He drove off out of the synagogue. This guy who was driving an ambulance happened to notice this, And as he's driving out of our synagogue, the tefillin falls off his car. Another car is passing by and sees this big bag fall off the top of my son-in-law's car, stops to pick it up and drive away. He thinks it's something of value. But this paramedic that was driving an ambulance happens to see this. He blocks the other car and he says, "Hey, you just picked something up from somebody else's car. Where are you driving away with it?" And he takes it from the other guy. He gives it back to my son-in-law. That happened 8 years ago. My son-in-law kept up some relationship with this guy. So now the fire department had defibrillators. They had some extra ones. And so the first place he thought to give those extra defibrillators was to our synagogue, because he kept up that relationship. And because of this whole experience, and because of the relationship that was kept up for all these years, what's my point? My point is that there is so much going on behind the scenes. You know, good things and also not good things, but in the end they're all good. You know, who would ever be able to take credit or even realize what's going on behind the scenes? Here you're driving out, somebody wanted to steal something that's expensive, another guy sees it and he stops to go and return it, and then that's still somehow making its way and working 8 years later to go and donate to our synagogue a defibrillator, which I hope we'll never need. This, when you realize all these different things that go on in life behind the scenes, and you focus and you pay attention to notice these things, life starts taking on a whole different dimension, a whole different perspective, because you don't know the whole picture. And you start thinking to yourself, you know, God for sure knows, and you become more accepting of what's going on. You become less anxious of the future. You stop worrying and being angry about the past, because all of it is God. And so it's simple and not so simple, because there's a lot to go and work on in order to get to that point. And this is what we're going to be starting. And tonight's just an introduction. That's why I'm bringing up so many different things, which really, like I said, and it's what I'm talking about. You know, some of these ideas, you can spend way more than one session just talking about it. Whether it's what you focus on, that's what becomes your reality, as we know in quantum physics. What you look at, that's what Niels Bohr said. It seems, said Niels Bohr, one of the big scientists in quantum physics, it seems like what you prepare your mind to measure seems to be what you identify. You know, so what you focus on, all of a sudden in life becomes very real, and what you ignore becomes not part of your life. So sometimes you got to change your focus in order to start noticing better things. So there's focus, and there's gratitude, and there's expanding your perspective to be one of help to other people in this world, not to be so selfish and inner oriented, which is really one of the biggest reasons. I mean, it's true that everything that I'm saying is so important as an ingredient to experiencing joy and happiness. As we said, it's so important, and unfortunately so lacking. And that's why this new master group that we're starting is called the Inner Power Circle, because it's really all about your inner power. When you are strong inside, then you have all the chances to succeed and to fulfill and to experience. You know, if your body is healthy, but your mind is not, or you're not feeling good in your heart, it's not really worth anything. But if your mind is strong and your heart is upbeat, now it doesn't even matter sometimes how your body is operating, because your mind is strong. You can think. You can find the resources. You're a pleasant person to be around. So we're starting this Inner Power Circle, which we're going to talk a little bit about when we finish tonight's session. Let me go on just a little bit more and tell you something which I think is so incredible. To me, personally, it's meant so much to me. What I'm going to talk to you about, which is also part of what is so helpful to develop a happy and a joyous kind of attitude in life. Let me give you just one other quick example. I see the time is moving along quickly, and I knew when I prepared it would be way more than 1 hour's talk. thought maybe we'd talk a half an hour. And then I said 45 minutes. I said, you know what? I'm going to give everybody some real good ideas, at least possibilities, points to consider. And they'll want to hear more and then join our inner power circle. Let me give another example that happened to me personally, that I experienced. So this guy sells his property in Massachusetts, and then in order to get a tax write-off, he takes the money to buy some real estate here in Florida. So he buys some property right down the street from the synagogue, and he's so happy. He found a nice property. It's next to the synagogue. He thinks he's going to get customers from the synagogue. And the guy's a happy-go-lucky kind of a guy, But what happened was, since he paid cash, so he didn't have to have insurance, and he didn't get the insurance on it right away. But unfortunately, in South Florida, there are hurricanes. A hurricane came, and although he got a good price on the property, it wiped out his property. That's it. It wiped it out entirely. I mean, it was terrible. The guy got hammered. So there went all his money. He thought he was going to save taxes, but he lost his whole property. So he lost all his principal, all his money. Okay. Somebody else comes by and sees an opportunity. So somebody else came and bought that property. He bought that property for a more or less good price. And he's, a happy-go-lucky kind of a guy. And all of a sudden, the economy went down. This was, I think, in 2008. I can't remember when it was. But the economy went down. So this guy was not very happy because he wanted to build rentals. He wanted to build these higher upper class townhouses to sell at a premium price. But who was buying houses at that price at that time? He couldn't do it. So he had to lay out the money, and he built these, fancy homes because that's what it was designed. The permits were for that, even though the economy went down. And then when he tried to sell it, nobody was buying at that price. So he decided to go and rent. But what happened was, besides losing so much money, the renters, unfortunately, at this cheap price that he was renting these beautiful townhomes, trashed his townhouse. Okay, what's the bottom line of the whole story? The bottom line is that there's nobody in the world that can teach you and tell you, do this, that, and the other, and this is the answer. And that's my answer to joy and happiness. There is no do this, that, and the other, and then you're going to see those results. Okay, sometimes you can say do this, that, and the other, and your chances are better to seeing those results, and there's a little merit to that. But in the big picture and in the many different efforts that a person makes, maybe sometimes more than not, he's going to or she's going to see surprises, and they take care of their health, still doesn't help. It tries to invest in the right way, it still doesn't help. They get married and they do the right things, and it still doesn't help. Okay, they did well in finances, but they don't do well in the other area or in more than one area. And so really, again, it's the inner power that I'm focused on. It's the thinking the right way. And if you think the right way, that's going to influence the way you feel. And that's really where the strength is. The majority of a person's strength is in the way they think, not in the restaurants they go to, not in the cruises they go on to, not in the more things they buy. Those are all exterior. Those are all superficial. Those are not going to make a difference in you. The difference in you is going to make when you change in you, in your head and in your heart. Let me tell you another thing that is interesting to consider when thinking about the big picture, and that's reincarnation. It's a very, very powerful idea that mysticism discusses and talks about. The Arizal, the great Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who lived in the 1500s, and we're now 2023, so that's about 500 years ago. He lived in Sfas. He was one of, and his student, Reb Chaim Vital, they taught a lot about reincarnation and how that works. As a matter of fact, the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria himself, said he was a reincarnation of a mohel, of a circumciser that was not such a good guy, wasn't so qualified, and as a result, he did harm to children. And the Arizal was a reincarnation of that mohel, of that circumciser, and as a result of that, the Arizal could not see blood. He didn't. The Arizal knew why, because he had a distaste for blood because of the problem that it brought about to people, and that his earlier soul, unfortunately, had to come back again into this world. And although there is so much opportunity living in this world and in serving God, and that's what we're so grateful every morning when we wake up, it's still a very hard struggle for the soul. So when you understand that there's such a concept of reincarnation, this explains a lot why there is sometimes, sicknesses in the world, that people are just born with this kind of a weak tendency. Or there are some people who have, everything just turns sour for them. Children that die, we should never know from this, that die young, or tzaddikim, righteous people who die early. And we can ask, how come, they did everything right? But that's the point that we're talking about. But there's a bigger picture. And it could be that child, I'll tell you a story about children, and it's not a very, a lot of these stories are not very pleasant, but that's the story that the books tell us. So everybody's familiar with King David. King David is the one that bought the place, the Temple Mount, to build on it the temples of the Jewish people, right? He paid for that mountain. And many of you may be familiar with the story with King David and Bathsheba. Bathsheba was really the wife of somebody else, and King David, he liked her appearance, so he sent her husband out to the front, and he died, and then he married this woman, Bathsheba. And even though King David did everything legally acceptable, it still was somewhat of what appeared to be not such a nice thing. You put your eyes on somebody else's wife, so you get her husband killed so that you can marry her. And so the story is that King David had a child from Bathsheba, but that child died, and died right away when the child was born in its infant. See, and what happened was, the books of reincarnation say that child was reincarnated in another child of King David, which was Absalom. Absalom was another child that was terrible, rebellious against King David. Right? He rebelled against his kingdom. King David had to run away for years because of this revolt from this son of Absalom. But Absalom, right? When you see this, you can ask yourself, but King David was such a good king. He did so much for the Jewish people. He composed and put together the book of Psalms. He was an actual portion of Adam's soul. The first person that God created, Adam and Eve, right? So King David was an actual piece of Adam's soul. That makes that very special, very powerful, very pure, very encompassing to be the right leader for all Jewish people. King David was incredible. And yet, why would he have a son like Absalom that gave him so much hardships and difficulty? And the books of mysticism explain that's because Absalom was a reincarnation of that child that came from the result of King David not acting in such a nice way. So what's the point that I'm telling you here with this reincarnation thing? That there is so much going on behind the scenes. When you realize that there's so much going on behind the scenes and the big picture of things, as we said, the tachlis hayadiyah, the absolute, so to say, goal of knowledge is not knowing that you don't know, that you can't figure it out. And that's why one of the best ways to manage stress is gamzu letoiva. Gamzu letoiva is one of the best statements that we have in the Talmud. Gamzu letoiva was by a person by the name of Nachum. Nachum, he taught us that when a person encounters these surprises that are not so pleasant, you answer to that experience, this too is for the good. And you can come to a point where you actually feel that it's for the good, even when you can't see that it's for the good. Like when you go to a doctor and he does something that hurts or is bitter, What do you say? How much should I pay you, doctor? Thank you for the for what you're able to go and do for me. The years that you went to school and the experience that you have. Thank you, doctor. This is for the good. That there is the technology, that there are the machines, that they'll be able to identify, they'll be able to address and deal with it. But it's not pleasant, the whole experience. But you've developed enough understanding that the education and that the experience of this doctor is good, is positive. Your mind and how and what you allow your mind to think is the key to everything. That's what I'm repeating again and again and again. What you feel, and we live in a negative world today, very, very negative. The news and the social media and the comparison is not good. It's very negative. It's bad. It's destructive. And there's lots of life that what we're talking about is really challenging, and it's out of our control, all these things. And so therefore a person's response to all these things by saying gamzu latoiva, this too is for the good, and what can I take out of it that can be a lesson on my road and on my path to good. This is so strengthening and so personally strong to give the person happiness and to give the person joy. Let me end tonight's talk. I see it's already 9:02. Let me end with a couple of ideas to take with you, because that's very important. We heard a lot of things here tonight. But the only way it's going to make a difference in your life, I don't want just to be entertaining and give you ideas that you may have heard and it's reminding you, or that they expanded upon ideas, or that they're new to you. That's not going to be good enough. What I want you to actually go away from tonight's talk in a way that it's going to improve you actually. And the only way you're going to be able to improve and everybody can use improvement in their state and in their level of joy and happiness. Everybody goes. It's a flux, and it's up and down. Everybody goes through it, and so we need to be able to have the strength to stay up. And we plateau sometimes. We fall and we dip into sometimes black holes and down into valleys. And so we need to be able to get that strength. And so, two things let me leave with you after the many different things that I already shared with you up to this point. And that is two Hasidic lessons. And one is from Reb Zusha, and one is from my own teacher of Mendel Futterfass. There was this great Chassid, this great tzaddik, his name was Reb Zusha of Anapoli, and he was a student of the Mizritcha Magid. Don't worry if you're not familiar with all those names. These are big people. And he was about to pass away, and he tells his students, I'm crying, and I'm a little unsure. And they said to him, but what, you lived your life in such a righteous and spiritual way. Why are you so unsure? What are you so afraid of? And Rabbi Zusha answers, and he says, when I come up to heaven, my soul returns back to its source, to its creator. They're going to ask me, so what did you do in this world? What path did you take? Did you reach the destinations that were intended for you to reach? I'm afraid I'm going to not be able to answer that question with full confidence. I know they're not going to ask me, why didn't you take the path of Moses? Because I'll say, I'm not Moses. I know they're not going to ask me, why did you take the path of Rabbi Akiva? Because they're not going to ask me that question. I'm not Rabbi Akiva. They're going to ask, did you reach your own destination that was intended and that you were given the strength and the power to reach? And I'm not so sure that I reached my full potential. And for that reason, I'm a little anxious and a little bit concerned of how I'm going to answer. And that's really a very big lesson I want to leave with you. And that is to really be joyous and happy, even if you look at Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all the other different things, don't compare your life to everybody else. Number one, what you see is not even the truth. People, you see how you see this picture behind me? I'm not in Israel. I'm sitting in my office here in South Florida. People who are more professional can create these kind of images where it appears like they're happy and it appears like they're doing or they are whatever it is. Most of these people fit into that description that we started out at the beginning of tonight's session, and that is there's a huge percentage of people that are not happy. I've heard this from a lot of very wealthy people, that the majority of wealthy people are not happy. So what's all that money in the world worth? They're going on cruises and trying to get distracted from their unhappiness. They're marrying 3 or 4 times and they're doing all kinds of parties. But how is that going to make them internally confident and joyous and happy and fulfilled? It's not. So the lesson from Reb Zusha is, don't compare yourself to anybody else. Their path is not your path. Their plate in front of them is not your plate that is in front of you. One very, very important lesson is to begin thinking in terms of, how do I make myself better every single day? How do I make myself better than I was yesterday? And when you feel like you're improving in your mental state, in your emotional state, in your contribution to the world, and you're doing a little better every single day, this is going to be one of the strongest sources of joy and happiness in your life. You're going to feel like you're growing. You're going to feel like you're becoming more and better in a real way. And that's going to give you the greatest sense of accomplishment. And number two, and I'm going to leave with this, Reb Mendel Futerfas, my teacher, my Hasidic mentor, he was in the Gulag in Siberia for 15 years. And I once heard him say at a Hasidic gathering, I don't know if it was at the beginning that he was sent to the Gulag, or maybe even before he sent over there to Siberia, with all the hardships and difficulty he had to live through there under Stalin in Russia. He said he made a decision in life that under all circumstances, he's going to be happy. He made a commitment. He made a decision. And he said that got him through life. That gets him through life. And that's a very, very important lesson. I remember from Reb Mendel Futerfas. He decided, he was aware and he was conscientious not to let his feelings and his emotions rule him. He decided that he was going to rule his thinking and his emotions. And that decision that he made, that he's going to be happy under all circumstances, is what got him through life. I heard this from his own mouth. So those are the two things I'm going to leave you with tonight. I know we talked and we touched upon a million different things, right? From decisions to comparison to gratitude to reincarnation to luck and to other different things. And this is really an introduction to a new master group that we're calling the Inner Power Circle, that we are starting, and that you're welcome to become a member of this group. And we're going to meet 2 times a month, and we're going to have these type of talks, but it's going to be more interactive. I'm going to allow you to ask your questions, and I'm going to answer your questions, and I'm going to give it to you, as you heard a little bit of it tonight, from many different perspectives: legal, spiritual, scientific, and many different other areas. There are not a lot of people that can give it to you from all these very many different angles and can substantiate and support what they're saying spiritually, metaphysically, legally, scientifically. But you're going to be able to get it here in this new Inner Power Circle. It's going to be all about coaching. It's going to be about feeding the mind. That's really what it's about, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. It all comes down to not buying more things or going more places. It becomes putting the lights on up over here in your head, getting the fire on down here in your emotions. And if you do that, that's really where the answer lies. Stay away from the negative environment. Hang around people that give you the ideas and messages that you're hearing right now tonight. And that's going to be in the Inner Power Circle.